Leighton Vander Esch will not be returning for the Dallas Cowboys this season. How much does this hurt the defense moving forward? All that and more this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat over 50 infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That is JASE medical.com. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we got some breaking news for the Cowboys that happened earlier this morning on 105.3 The Fan. Jerry Jones announced that Leighton Vander Esch would not be returning this season as he continues to deal with a neck injury. It's not all that surprising, but we did get some news that, hey, it was maybe a 4 to 6 week injury when it first happened. So I just want your overall thoughts on where we are at with Leighton Vander Esch.
Well, I mean, the first things here is that I feel terrible for Leighton. You know, I mean, just for him to battle back from these injuries and then to have another one and then, have a third and look, when this injury happened, the prognosis was what it was, but I think we all kind of in the back of our minds were like, man, he's already had a really serious neck injury. It's another neck injury. Part of me at the time was like, I don't know what the prognosis is, but I can't imagine that it's good for Leighton Vander Esch to be playing football right now. And I think that we had kind of heard whispers in the wind that may be the case, and that he may be taking a little bit longer than expected to return. I have to be honest, Marcus, I felt like at the very least we weren't going to see him this season anyways, so
that's kind of where I was at when it first happened. Like, maybe there's an outside chance you get him back for the playoffs, but I wasn't expecting anything more.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect of this is that, from the Cowboys' point of view, right? And obviously that's what this podcast is about. They feel like you found a burgeoning superstar at the position at Marquise Bell, who's continued to play incredible throughout these last few weeks. And that's, that's just the Cowboys side of things, right? Like, as far as what are we doing with replacing the player, but I think it made the decision to kind of go to Leighton and say, hey, like, we don't need you to rush back from this at this point. Like, you need to make sure that you're healthy. We'd love to have you back in the future if that's possible, but like, we shouldn't even be this season shouldn't be in consideration.
No.
Whether or not you're healthy to ever play again should be the consideration. And honestly, like, after what for what we're talking about, like, I'm not a medical professional, but I can't imagine that it's worth it at this point for Leighton Vander Esch to get back onto a field after having suffered several of these neck injuries.
Yeah, and especially when you consider, like, he was a first-round pick who played out his rookie contract. He got a second deal from the Cowboys, and then he got a third deal from the Cowboys. He's got the NFL's pension now that he's played so many games. Like, if this ends up being it, and I certainly hope it's not, I hope that Leighton Vander Esch has the choice whether he wants to play or not.
Yeah, exactly.
This one's just really difficult. I'm trying to think about how to say this because I don't want to reveal too much. But neck injuries are just really hard. It's not like a broken foot or even a torn ACL or torn Achilles where you have a timeline. It's a lot of let's wait and see. And from what at least I know, it doesn't sound like the injury that he suffered this year, it's all that different than the one he suffered last year. Remember at the end of the year when he had the stinger, he missed the final 4 games of the season, and then he came back and played in the playoff games and actually played really well in both of the playoff games.
Yeah.
It just seems like he's not recovering as quickly as the Cowboys were anticipating, or maybe not even recovering at all. And that's why the Cowboys, and I think it was purposeful. I think that there was a push to get this out. Basically, hey, do not rush back, Leighton Vander Esch. We want you to be 100% healthy. Don't feel like you're letting the Cowboys down if you're not
Yeah.
ready to go by
Yeah.
Thanksgiving or whatever.
Yeah, and any effort being made to try to like hurry him back. I mean, I don't want to be graphic, but like, what the very last thing that any of us want to see is Leighton Vander Esch laid out on the field, unable to move,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of thing we're talking about with neck injuries, So it's extremely serious, and like I think there are levels to these injuries, but we have to remember that like the levels include extremely severe, injury, and to the point we haven't seen anything super severe short of what's happened to DeMar Hamilton last year. But
Hamlin,
we don't, we
yeah.
don't. I'm sorry, Hamlin. We don't want to like, put anybody into a position or be responsible for putting anybody in a position that happens.
Yeah.
Leighton Vander Esch is a warrior, and he's going to try to do everything he can to push his body, maybe even unsafe things to try to get him back on the field. I think it's important that the Cowboys came out and said, hey, look, there's no expectation. In fact, you're not going to be made active even if you come back this year. It's not happening, just to make sure that there's enough time given by the medical staff and by Leighton himself so that he can make a smart decision for his future. I mean, we're talking about the rest of his life. He's 27 or 28 years old, for God's sakes.
Well, and I think that's the other thing. And I'm not reporting any news or anything, but basically having Jerry Jones come out and say, hey, he's not coming back, gives him the option to where if he wants to have a surgery or is able to have a surgery, he can do that now and not have to worry about, okay, well, what if I potentially could get healthy 2 months from now and help out in the playoffs? Now he can make the decision what's best for him long term. So we wish Leighton Vander Esch the absolute best. We hope that he gets healthy. Just really quickly on the linebacker. So you mentioned Marquise Bell playing really well. Damone Clark has started every game. Another linebacker that dealt with some neck injuries coming out of LSU. I think we're going to see Rashaan Evans sign on the 53-man roster this week. How is that group kind of going forward to the rest of the season? Do you feel confident that they can get the job done?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel weirdly better about the linebacker crew. I mean, not to be like that, but I mean, Leighton Vander Esch's injury obviously opened the door for a guy in Marquise Bell. And look, I mean, again, not trying to kick anyone while they're down, but I mean, I think honestly, if Leighton Vander Esch didn't have a neck and was coming back right now and was like, let's say this was a hammy instead of a neck injury, I think there would be a very serious conversation as to whether or not he should be eating into Marquise Bell's playing time.
I mean, he wouldn't be a full-time starter if he was 100%.
I think it would be more of a rotational situation, more of a let's get him in and get him some snaps situation, because I don't know that you can take Marquise Bell off the field. And Damone Clark has played extremely well too. I mean, he's just very, very solid, frankly, at a level that was probably as good, if not better, than Leighton before Leighton got injured. So,
and the reason it's the speed, right? You just see a noticeable difference in speed when Marquise Bell is on the field compared to Leighton Vander Esch. Now, Vander Esch helps you in other areas.
Yeah, sure.
But for Dan Quinn, speed is the number one thing.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that you've gotten some pretty good snaps out of Rashaan Evans too, and I think that's been really beneficial. I mean, he saw some very solid snaps, especially early in this game against the Giants. He looked really good. He's kind of been slow playing this whole situation, learning the defense a little bit more. But he looks like a guy that can give you good, solid third linebacker snaps, right? Like, I think you feel better about Rashaan Evans signing now that you're considering him as the guy that's rotating in, as opposed to the guy that's taking Leighton Vander Esch's place. Now that we've seen that Marquise Bell, I mean, look, can we just take a moment and just say how incredible it is that Marquise Bell is still doing this, and how much did he save that linebacker room by stepping up and being not just good, not just like okay, not just the best linebacker on the team, but playing like, I mean, Pro Bowl level. I mean, frankly, like it's not ridiculous to suggest that, right? Like,
It's wild that the Cowboys might have found 2 starting linebackers in the 2022 draft, and they didn't have to spend more than a 5th round pick on the 2 players combined. It's absolutely insane. Landon, we've got a bunch of things we need to talk about today because we watched the all-22 tape from Sunday's game. I want to talk about the offense, which is finally clicking for the Cowboys. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply on ED medications. Do you realize what this means? That means you can go on extended trips. You don't have to worry about supply chain issues. You are covered, my friend. Now you don't have to worry about whether or not you can refill your generics for Cialis or Viagra. And this is possible because of our friends at Jase Medical. Go online right now at jasemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jase. I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half just so that I could have them. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year's supply. I also ordered an antibiotic kit, and I feel secure now. Prices are lower than ever. I highly recommend this for every single one, every single person. If you or someone you love would like to get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any of your daily meds, go to jasemedical.com to see if they're offered to you. Remember to use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Football season is here, and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanisha Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Landon, let's talk about the Cowboys offense. Early in the year, we thought that everything looked clunky. Nothing felt smooth about this offense at all. Over the last 3 or 4 games, seems like things are starting to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a number of different factors, and we've seen it. Like, first, let's present the evidence, right? Like, what we've seen is the operation just looking more advanced. We see more motions, more shifts, especially since the bye week. Everything also and that's the interesting thing is that those stuff, the pre-snap motion, the shifts and everything, that can actually make it more difficult to kind of properly get the snap off, execute everything, because it's a lot to take care of. The quarterback's got to make sure the motion happens. You got to make sure that everyone's shifting in time, that it doesn't incur a pre-snap penalty. It's just a little bit more to take care of. The fact that they've been able to kind of add more of that stuff while actually reducing the number of penalties, I think that's the kind of evidence that this team this offense specifically is just coordinated more. It just feels more in sync with each other. I think there's a couple of different factors here. One, I think they really did some good work on the bye week. It just feels like they took the time to kind of do some self-scouting. They added some elements that I felt like were needed, including some of the motion and snap stuff. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think we've all seen on Twitter the increase in usage of those, I think, going from middle of the pack to top 10 suddenly, right? I think those things, plus, a reduction, it seemed like, in some of the kind of pre-snap penalties, I think it's contributed to just general continuity in the offense, having been in this offense for now 9 weeks. But I think also the offensive line continuity. We've now had, I think, 3 weeks, maybe 4, where you finally had your intentional starting offensive line in the lineup.
Not in a row, but for the most part, right? Because
for the most part, right?
Yeah, Tyron missed a couple games, but
so I think that having those guys in and practicing week to week, I think has helped with their coordination a lot more. And then I also think that an underrated element of this that is, which is contributed to some of the really kind of cooler, and that was the next point I wanted to make, was some of the cooler run stuff that we have been doing, especially this week. It felt like you saw a lot more of these kind of cooler tight toss plays. They ran a weak side counter that Dowdle ran for like 21 yards, which was just gorgeous. I think having Blasco back since week 8 has really kind of helped. Just the coordination between the offensive line and the running back room, everything just seems tighter. I think the running backs are seeing the holes better. And I also think that, look, it's still a case where it's tough slogging in the first half, and then by the second half, you're seeing the gains start to get more and more. But I think that's how it's supposed to look. But I think in general, you just look at this offense and there's less instances of guys, you still had Cooks and CD running into each other on that one post route. But outside of that, like, you didn't see a ton of these multiple wide receivers in the same spot, or a false start where a guy, didn't, get the cadence correctly. It just feels like in general, the offense is gelling now in a way that they weren't previous to the bye.
What really helps is when you have a left tackle who doesn't give up a pressure in back-to-back games. That's really nice. It makes the offense a lot easier when you can go 5-man protections or 6-man protections and just know that your left tackle's not going to give up anything. It also helps when you have CeeDee Lamb just catching 11 passes for 170 yards every single game. It makes the offense a lot easier. And actually, we need to give Mike McCarthy a lot of credit. Early in the year, the Cowboys were very run heavy on first down. Now they still are to a degree, but we are seeing that pass rate on first and second down go way up. They're just putting the ball in Dak Prescott's hands more often. And surprise, surprise, the offense is really good when that happens. Like, it's shocking when your elite quarterback gets to throw the ball 40 times. Good things generally happen. So it also seems like, and I don't want to dog him, but it seems like the Cowboys have kind of phased out Michael Gallup on offense in the first half a little bit, and then kind of mix him in as the game goes on rather than making a focal point right away. And it just seems like things are running much more smoothly.
Yeah, I just feel like they're using a heavier rotation of all wide receivers, right? Yeah. You're seeing Jalen Brooks get out there and getting
Jalen Scott or Jalen Brooks?
I think it's still Brooks. It's getting multiple targets and opportunities. We didn't see too much of Tolbert, but he was out there a ton, especially early in the game. So I just think that they are availing themselves of all. They even talked about it in the interviews on Monday. Right? Is that it's important to get opportunities on offense and defense for every single player that's stressed out. Right? And I think that they've done a better job of that, and it's actually helped them. I think that plus they're starting to use these guys in a more sensible manner that I think befits their skill sets, especially Cooks, right? You're seeing more of just not just sending him deep, but trying to get him some work in the middle underneath so that he can get away from defenders. And I think all those things are good for the offense overall. And I think getting the opportunity for some of these guys like Brooks and Tolbert, that's going to pay dividends down the road, especially if there's an injury or anything, But I think it's going to be beneficial having multiple guys that you feel confident getting the ball to in times that you really need to.
And the other thing is, we still have a few players on offense that haven't quite clicked, like Luke Schoonmaker dropped a pass on Sunday. Deuce Vaughn still has really no role in this offense. What we saw him the first couple of weeks of the season, and then basically gone. Kevontae Turpin didn't play on Sunday with a shoulder issue. The offense can still get better and more effective. They've got other weapons they want to use. We even saw Jake Ferguson drop the pass. So they can get even better, which should be terrifying for opposing defenses coming up.
Yeah, I think that's really the thing, right? Is that there's lots of talent on this team, but I think a couple of weeks ago, it was tough for us to see how this improvement was going to come, without changes in the offense. I think what we've seen is the changes in the offense have happened, and you're starting to see improved play from some of these players. It's made a marked difference in the play of like Cooks and guys like that. So,
well, I also think it just helps. I know it's not as simple as just giving CD the ball a lot, but sometimes it is, right? Like if you could at least get the offense going and get the chains moving, now that opens up other opportunities for other players. And to me, it's not a coincidence that CD has gotten double-digit targets in each of the last 4 games, and those are the 4 best offensive games that we've seen all season. Players just play well off of CD. Cooks is getting big matchups. You're seeing Ferguson become more involved in the red zone. It really feels like the plan on offense going forward should be, how do we get CD 12 to 14 targets a game and then kind of go from there?
I think it's changed from letting the defense pick their poison, like who's open, to we're spamming the CD button until you stop us, and then depending on how you try to stop us, that's who's getting the ball next.
Well,
So
and that's been very common with teams like the Rams and Cooper Kupp and the Vikings with Justin Jefferson. And instead of, having the defense kind of force what you do on offense, it's the other way. We're going to move our guy around and you have to react to what we're doing. And it's just made the Cowboys so much more dynamic on that side of the ball.
And the only way to stop him is to do something drastic on defense. And once you've done something drastic on defense, then we'll take advantage of it with our other players.
All right, let's talk about the Cowboys' first round rookie defensive tackle, Mazi Smith, and how he played on Sunday next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That is $150 if your team wins. The Cowboys are going to be one of the favorites in survivor pools this week. They are, I think, an 11-point favorite against the Panthers. I know Landon has been worried about a trap game all weekend, but if you want to try to get your $150 in bonus bets right here, Cowboys probably not a bad bet on the money line. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. All right, Landon, finishing out our All-22 segment here. Let's talk about Mazi Smith, who, if you look at like PFF grades, this was his best game of the season. Dan Quinn spoke glowingly about Mazi Smith in yesterday's press conference. What did you see on tape?
Yeah, it's definitely his best game. He was able to make an impact early in the game specifically, had a couple of different tackles for loss. I think he probably should have gotten a half sack on that. What was it, Armstrong sack, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I think you're just seeing a guy who's starting to get it a little bit. Even on the tackle for loss, it looked like he came off the ball a little bit late. Go back and watch the tape, and he definitely still got off the ball late, but part of that was because he was doing being part of a twist, and he was the late looper. I actually think that they need to do more of that because he's really hard to stop on the move. He's just so physical and strong that if you can get him going, he's very, very difficult to stop. I think the positive thing that we're seeing is that he's affecting the pass game as well. It's not just in the run game. He didn't get this half sack, but he probably at least got a pressure and he was affecting the passer for sure. So these are all positive signs. I mean, he's not, necessarily broken out quite yet. But from what I understand, I think you said that he rated very highly as the highest defensive tackle on the team. I'm pretty sure he was also the highest ranked rookie defensive tackle in the league.
Mm-hmm.
I know Jalen Carter was off this week, but still, that's still very good. So I think that clearly, and as you mentioned, Dan Quinn had talked about it, that you see the arrow pointing up. I think you can see that on tape. The consistency is better than where it was. He's still kind of playing somewhere in the area of 20 to 25 snaps, but
which is a good number for him. I kind of don't want him to get higher than that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if we could just get a little more consistency on those 25 snaps, man, you're really going to have something in him. So, just a lot of improvement there. Starting to have an effect on offenses on the stat sheet is not just, as a cog in the middle of this defense. But I think it's been really beneficial to have him on the field and get these snaps these last few weeks. I think he's shown them good stuff.
Another reason why I don't really want to see his snap counts go over like 25, 27 is because Jonathan Hankins is playing really well.
Yeah.
If you watch the All-22, I mean, he made several big plays in this game. I kind of like the idea of trying to keep both of these players fresh as we get into this wild stretch that we talk about every year with the Cowboys. I think pretty sure it's 4 games in 18 days the Cowboys are going to play. You're going to need these guys to be, fresh, quick. You're going to need to use a heavy rotation. So I'm perfectly fine with the usage here.
Speaking of, I have to fully mea culpa. Neville Gallimore had a really good game on Sunday and has
going to cost him a lot of money to have that good game.
Yeah, yes, that was his. I mean, come on, man, he can't do that. But outside of that, like, I feel like he's been playing pretty decent football these last few weeks. I think everybody is fitting into their current roles very well at the defensive tackle room. I think that's ultimately what it is. You're not overplaying Hankins. You're able to keep him fresh, and that's why you're seeing such good Jonathan Hankins. Mazi is starting to step up in his snap, so you're not having to hold your breath every other snap when he's on there. Now he's playing good football, and if not positive football, as he kind of ascends his way up. You're getting Gallimore in there with a couple positives. He's at least not being a major liability like he has been in the past. You're still seeing Golston and all the other guys that are mixing in there. And that was the other thing I should point out, is that it felt like in this game you saw as many defensive ends playing defensive tackle as possible, because the Cowboys got up so early that they were pass rushing the whole time. So I think the benefit of that is that by the end of the season, having played in a ton of these kind of blowout games, you might have a little bit fresher defensive tackle rotation than you would have normally. So, I think Mazi has been the guy that we should mention here. But I think that the trickle-down effect for having more talented defensive tackles in the room than they previously did last year has helped everybody across the board, including Osa. And I think it's just kept everybody a lot fresher.
Last thing on the defense before we head out. Dante Fowler had 8 pressures on 18 snaps, which is absolutely wild. I saw Michael Parsons complaining on Twitter a little bit that maybe he didn't love his role this week, having to play off the ball linebacker, because he probably saw what Fowler was doing. It was like, man, it could have been
Williams too. Williams also played really, really well. So yeah, I don't blame Parsons, and I kind of feel like there's some thought that this Leighton Vander Esch thing would maybe mean more snaps for a linebacker. I would not anticipate that, because I don't think he was thrilled with his situation this last week. So we'll see. I mean, again, he's always going to be kind of in the mix there a little bit, but I think that the Cowboys knew that they could get to the quarterback without having to use their crown jewel pass rusher. I don't think Micah liked having to take a week off from
covering Saquon Barkley on flat routes like he had to do a couple times.
I mean, they're friends, so I think it's okay, but I don't think they're that close. So I think Micah wanted to get after this quarterback a little bit more than he did, and I'm sure he'll get a better opportunity.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions, so make sure that you send them into us at Marcus_Mosher, at McCoolBCB. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out our show on YouTube. Again, we'll be back here tomorrow answering your Twitter questions. We've got a crossover show on Thursday to get you ready for Cowboys Panthers, and then Landon, you and I back on Friday to get you ready for this trap game. Week 11, is that fair?
I mean, listen, I think it's a trap game. The question is whether the Cowboys will fall for the trap. That's the question.
If we call it a trap game, we have every other Dallas Cowboy writer, podcaster say a trap game. Maybe it won't be a trap game.
That's my plan. I'm just telling everyone, everyone call it a trap game. Then they'll get annoyed by, it's a trap game, and then they'll work extra hard.
Exactly. All right. We'll see you guys right back here tomorrow.